All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome officially and good morning. Thank you so much for joining us virtually today. My name is Hayla Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's reading, Personal Growth with Mental Health Professionals and Their Latest Publications. We'll be hearing today from Paul Dunion, reading from Family in Search of Genuine Belonging, which was released on March 26th. Emily Colwell reading from What If You're Right? Discover How Right You Are in a World That Makes You Feel So Wrong, releasing May 28th. And Janet Zinn reading from In the Time of Coronavirus, Reflecting on the Past to Embrace a Joyful Future, releasing June 4th. All three authors' books can be purchased both from online retailers and from select bookstores. And of course, you can order the books on Atmosphere Press's website just by going atmospherepress.com/books. And I'll also put some links in the chat here for you. At the end of today's event, we are going to have time for audience questions. So during the readings, if you have a question for one or more of our authors, just go ahead and type that in the chat and I'll make sure it gets asked. And then during the reading itself, please stay muted to keep extraneous sound at a minimum. Of course, you can always feel free to use the chat for any praise and comments. And one last note is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much to everyone here for tuning in and supporting Paul, Emily, and Janet. We're going to start off with our first reader, who is Paul Dunion. Paul is a teacher, author, mediator, and transformational coach. He founded Boys to Men, a mentoring program for teenage boys, and Comega, the semi-annual Connecticut men's gathering now in its 32nd year of service. Paul is a senior consultant and transformative faculty with Mobius Executive Leadership. He has spent over 40 years offering therapeutic support to folks committed to interrupting the darker elements of family legacies, as well as holding on to the best of those legacies. Family, In Search of Genuine Belonging, is his 8th book. Paul lives in Eastern Connecticut with his wife, Connie, and dog, Cody. Learn more at www.pauldunion.com. Today, we'll be hearing from the book Family, where readers are taken on a journey to explore the many different ways that love can be derailed within a family dynamic. From the surface level facade of the looking good family to the emotionally enmeshed and estranged families, Paul provides insightful guidance on how to identify and break free from toxic patterns that may be holding us back. Now, let's welcome Paul.
Thank you, Hala. Thank you. This first piece I'm going to read is from the first chapter, Looking at the Family. And the section is entitled, There is No Perfect Family. Unfortunately, the idea that you came from a perfect family is an illusion, and one that can be very difficult to swallow. What makes coming from a non-perfect family of origin so difficult to accept? Maybe that it implies that somehow your family experience had less than a pristine impact on your character. Of course, there are no perfect people, and therefore no perfect parents. I suggest that your parents did the best they could, and it wasn't enough. My best wisdom is that to be born in a family guarantees two things. You will be wounded and you will be gifted. Most people struggle to hold both offerings and become myopic, only considering the gifts or the injuries. Early primitive loyalty to the parent only drives a sustained vision of the gifts, while an obsessive need to focus on the injuries only leaves us victims of our family experience, seriously compromising personal power. Psychological wellness means being able to live in a family of origin story that includes both wounds and gifts. The gifts may be an encouragement to develop certain talents and strengths, as well as following what is loved and cherished. It can be a gift to receive modeling from an authority figure regarding being responsible, honest, kind, courageous. An ancient definition of the word wound is banging into. We can either bang into too much or too little. Banging into too much can be viewed as emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, while banging into too little is what happens when there's physical or emotional neglect. Julie, a 42-year-old primary school teacher, had been working with me for some time and was gaining more clarity about the gifts and the wounds she received in her family of origin. She was even able to identify a gift that came from the wound. It has been quite a journey, starting with accessing the grief resulting from my mother dying when I was 12. My father struggled terribly with the loss of his wife and did whatever he could to distract himself from the loss, including neglecting my two younger brothers and me. He just could not show up for us. I began parenting my two younger brothers. That's not to say I knew what I was doing. I just made stuff up. Making sure there was enough food, making sure they got to school and didn't get into too much trouble. Julie recounted her early family experience with a measure of sadness and anger. I hear that you not only are honest about your experience, but in the last session, you suggested you were getting clearer about something positive that came out of the paternal neglect, I added, in the hope that Julie had enough emotional resiliency to address this issue. That's right. I do have more clarity about what you call a gift that came from neglect. At 42, I have no problem being self-reliant. That's what the neglect gave me. It generated a capacity for self-reliance. I see myself as very capable of identifying and meeting my own needs. Of course, the wounded element of the neglect is that I still struggle to ask for help and believe that someone might be a real resource for me, she explained, demonstrating a great deal of self-awareness. Didn't you mention that an aunt came into your life when you were 15? I asked, remembering that some relative had made a difference along the way. Yes, my Aunt Kate, my mother's sister, began to help out whenever she could. I guess she made a positive impression. She was a teacher, and I always wanted to be like her, she shared with her eyes moistening with gratitude. I remember you mentioning how much your aunt gave, I offered. Yeah, I don't think we would have made it without her. She was kind, helped me pay the bills, confronted my father about his drinking, and taught me to drive a car, she expressed, her eyes lighting up with even more appreciation. Julie's psychological work had taken her to increased clarity about what was lost and what was given to her and her family of origin. She was accepting family life as a place to be wounded and gifted, and asking for healing and learning about herself and about life. We began to address the issue of parentification, which in Julie's experience meant a lost childhood as she attempted to parent younger siblings. The second piece is exactly about what happened to Julie. The chapter is called Parentification. Parentification of children happens when parents are either unwilling and are unable to effectively parent their children. Parental absence may occur because of mental illness, addiction, arrested development, medical issues, or unavailability due to work or travel. Parentified children step into the parental void, the attempt to take on parental responsibilities. This snatches children out of childhood, disengaging them from a normal developmental process. Quite often, adult parental children have carved some niche where they feel confident and secure. It may be a professional arena or a hobby. They know that in a safe place, they don't have to worry about being confused, or pretending to know, or needing help. However, their relational lives, which cannot be reduced to a simple set of regulations, will likely be where they face the greatest opportunity to welcome some healing. It will mean finding the courage to call off their moratorium on noticing they need help and acquiring it. Lastly, upon being self-examining, adults who are parentified as children need to see themselves on a continuum, reflecting some degree of parentification. Parentification is all very familiar to me. I was a parentified child. My early understanding of it happened during a medical visit for my father, who was being treated for poor circulation. I was 16 at the time when the physician came out to speak to my mother about my father's condition. She stepped back several paces, leaving me in the path of receiving the doctor's message. It would be some years before I would become more curious about where I came from. Although my adolescence was reflective of some athletic and academic success, the striving instilled in me by both the roles of a hero and a parentified child left me feeling an unquenchable inadequacy. It wasn't until I was 29 that I succumbed to a deep need to get help. It was likely that the death of one daughter and the birth of another completely disabled brought me to an undesirable sense of defeat. Since I had been groomed to pretend that I knew what I was doing, I was engulfed in shame. There was simply no more room for pretense. I learned that my mother likely felt quite frightened about being a parent, fearing some level of failure, as well as bearing the scars of her own paternal neglect. The stage was set for calling an older son into the role of attempting to parent his mother, a task doomed to failure. I recall my therapist asking me to bring some pictures of childhood to the next session. I brought one when I was the age of 12 and another at the age of 17. She looked at the picture at age 12 and she said, "Well, you look 17 in this picture." And then she gazed at the one where I was 17 and she said, "My God, you look like 29 in this one." I was immediately curious about how I did come to look older than I was. I'll always remember her words. The psyche holds a powerful energy. When you were convinced that you should be older than you were, your psyche likely enrolled your body to help play the role of being older. You emotionally responded to the family's need for you to exit childhood. So you did, in mind and in body. Now it's time to return. It's not too late for you to reclaim your childhood. And that was always yours, explained Joyce, her compassion and encouragement being palpable as she leaned forward, clearly convinced that the task of reclaiming my childhood was certainly attainable. How do I begin? I puzzled, with the photograph swirling in my brain. You've already begun. You're here, seeking help, admitting there might be someone larger than you who could assist and guide you. Joyce explained, her words landing on me as a trustworthy reassurance. I'm not sure if I'll ever completely reclaim my lost childhood. However, I did get incremental help along the way. I recall my old professor, Ken Blanchard, saying, quote, "I never make major decisions alone," which went a long way to interrupt my compulsive self-reliance. I feel comfortably less urgent with facing the unknown. I stay as close as possible to the mantra, more will be revealed, and typically it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you for sharing this reading with two different sections that you read from. I think that really gives a good sense of the scope. Reading next today is Emily Colwell. Dr. Emily Colwell is a licensed and board-certified naturopathic doctor and therapist whose extensive career spans 3 decades. She earned a master's degree from Columbia University's School of Social Work and a doctorate in naturopathic medicine from Bastyr University in Seattle. Emily's personal encounters with anxiety, childhood trauma, family addiction, chronic illness, shifting sexual orientation, and cancer have been her teachers, showing her the capacity for healing regardless of the circumstances. Learn more at www.dremilycolwell.com. The book, What If You're Right, shows you how to end self-improvement exhaustion and find your utterly wise, mighty, held, and whole self, despite feeling and being told otherwise. Emily, who is a therapist and physician with a combined 30 years of experience, dispels the myth that we need to look outside ourselves for validation and direction. And we'll hear more now from Emily herself. Oh, Emily, it looks like you might be muted.
There we go. Nope, that wouldn't go well, would
Perfect. Very quiet reading.
Okay. So I'm gonna skip the intro and read chapter 1 with you. The title is I Had a Love Affair with My Cancerous Thyroid. You have thyroid cancer, and the biopsy results suggest a 95% chance it's aggressive. That's the call I received from my endocrinologist in December 2017. I was shocked. I'd had biopsies of my thyroid nodules in the past simply because they were present, shown to be a specific size, and my mom had had thyroid cancer years earlier. The needle biopsy procedures were never a favorite of mine, but they were certainly manageable. I went for yearly checkups and everything always checked out, including biopsies. But when I went for my routine checkup in 2017, my doctor asked the same questions I'd heard every year, but one question made me pause. Was I experiencing any changes in swallowing? I had been struggling with swallowing on the right side of my neck for at least 8 months. Whenever I swallowed pills, it felt like they were stuck in my throat, partway down the right side. It also happened when I swallowed certain foods. Here I was, a doctor, yet I'd never paused to wonder about it. I simply joked about it with my wife, frequently laughing about menopause and how symptoms even climb up in the throat. My body was changing in many ways as I navigated my way through my newer menopausal symptoms, and my mind simply brushed it off as just another one, I mentioned all this to my doc, which prompted his request for a repeat ultrasound, which led to another biopsy. While the ultrasound showed a new nodule more sizable than the others, I continued to feel relaxed about it, as my thyroid had never given me any trouble other than having nodules hanging out on it. Then I got the call. It was malignant and probably aggressive. By the time I hung up, I was trembling violently. The trembling lasted for a solid 2 hours. No matter how many sweaters, jackets, or blankets I wrapped around me, I couldn't warm up as I sat on the couch trying to make sense of this news. My first thoughts were, how is this even possible? I've learned to take such good care of myself. I've done so much therapy over the years. I've processed the wazoo out of my traumas. I generally have a positive outlook. That's when I realized I'd come to believe that taking care of myself, working through my traumas, and trying to fix myself like I was some kind of perpetual self-improvement project would somehow make me immune to cancer or other unwanted experiences. This thought, of course, led me to the next thought, which was somehow this must be my fault. I must not have worked hard enough to heal my issues. I must have overlooked something. I felt surprisingly ashamed, as if I'd done something wrong that resulted in this, which only compounded my experience as I sat there shaking violently. If I had cancer, I must be wrong. My mind had automatically shifted into using a lens of wrongness to view my situation, only able to notice everything awful about it. It kicked into future tripping as it spun out worst case scenarios. My daughters were 3 and 7 at the time, and my wife and I had been together for 10 years. I'd spent time envisioning how unbearable it would be to lose any of them, but I hadn't previously allowed myself to consider what it might be like if I had to leave them too soon. See, worst case scenarios from the get-go. As these thoughts hijacked my mind, the powerlessness catapulted me back to that time in my life many years earlier when I was chronically ill for 8 years in my 20s. I felt a deep dread as this vortex of powerlessness that had once swirled through my life began to overtake me again. Suddenly, it shifted. As I sat trembling on my couch, I started to feel a strange and overwhelming appreciation for my thyroid. I was stunned to recognize that my sweet little thyroid had been doing amazing things to support my body since I was in the womb, yet I'd never once thought to appreciate her. Soon after, I knew I needed to give her a thyroid farewell party, and my sweet thyroid had spent almost 49 years underappreciated, practically ignored, yet remained committed to doing a stellar job of thyroiding my body. Clearly, it was time to throw her a party and flood her with appreciation before she headed out. I shared with friends and colleagues and posted on social media, letting people know that my thyroid would accept letters and notes of appreciation from all those eager to recognize a job well done. This appreciation only grew through this experience and quickly evolved into an all-out love affair with my cancerous thyroid. As I sat digesting the gravity of my new diagnosis, I became acutely aware of how I did not want to feel. I did not want this deep sense of powerlessness. 3 hours in, another unexpected question broke through. How did I want to feel? Simply asking myself this question felt empowering. Here's what I realized. I wanted to have 100% clarity about which treatments I'd use to address my cancer. I wanted to feel empowered through the process. For the first time in hours, I felt a glimmer of relief. Yet my mind continued to draw me back to a focus on how I did not want to feel. Each time I caught this, I shifted my focus to what I did want to feel, clarity and empowerment. Over the following weeks, I noticed that the faster I shifted my focus back to how I wanted to feel as I moved through my experience, the more relief I felt. I repeatedly let go of how I wanted things to look or turn out, and instead focused on how I wanted to feel as I moved through it. I reminded myself that I did not have to know how, where, or when the clarity and empowerment would show up. All I needed to know was that that's what I wanted to feel no matter what turn my cancer took. Little by little, it came from various places until one day I felt 100% clear about my next steps. Now I had a tool that enabled me to step back into moments of empowerment and relief when I needed them. A couple of weeks after my diagnosis, I went to the gym before any treatment had been implemented. As I started my workout, I quickly felt like I was pushing a boulder up a mountain. I had no energy and felt ready to throw in the towel and head home. My mind immediately chastised me, saying, "Oh, great, look what's happening. You're already identifying too much with your cancer, and now you don't even have the energy to exercise." No sooner had I thought this when I heard a crystal clear voice say, "Emily, health is pouring through you right now. It's just pouring through you, honey." Looking around with surprise, I quickly realized this wasn't the voice of someone nearby, but was a voice from within. There I was with what I understood to be an aggressive form of thyroid cancer, Yet health was pouring through me at the same time, with millions of other things in my body working spectacularly well. And I was simultaneously experiencing a love affair with my cancerous thyroid. Experiencing this rightness changed how I experienced the wrongness of my cancer. I understood how possible it is to have a different experience with just about anything in our lives when we shift the lens we use to one that invites curiosity instead of automatic wrongness. Because let's face it, it's pretty darn easy to view cancer as definitively wrong. Dark night. On the eve of my Colwell party, I was thrust into a dark night of the soul. Feelings of terror, grief, confusion, and sadness overwhelmed me, and I felt like I might not survive their depth. My mind kept searching to identify the specific stories to attach to the feelings and explain them. I cried many tears. I noticed where I felt the feelings in my body. I whispered soothingly to the part of me that was so scared and gently told myself over and over that I could feel the feelings, that it was okay to be feeling them, and that I was showing up for them and acknowledging them. Here's the thing about the stories we have. They're not wrong, not one bit. We need to have stories that help explain how we feel. Yet I've discovered that how I focus on the stories influences how I move through the feelings. There's often a pull to focus on the stories because it distracts me from experiencing the feelings underneath them. I moved through this dark night of the soul, doing this human dance of feelings and worried that it would impact my experience at my Colwell party that night. And it did impact my party, but not in the way I expected. When I awoke in the morning, I remembered that it's possible to feel more than one feeling simultaneously. I made room for joy and appreciation to exist alongside sadness and fear. I made room for the stories and feelings to coexist. I wandered through the day, making space for all of these emotions to be present until I began to notice a feeling of appreciation from the confusion, fear, and sadness. It was as if they had been waiting to be acknowledged and allowed and not made wrong for all these years. And it was finally happening. My feelings gave me a gift by showing up, and I gave them the gift of acknowledgement in return. When my Colwell party started, I was filled with joy and gratitude. So many wonderful people showed up to celebrate my sweet thyroid and share their love with my family and me. I connected in meaningful ways with so many who attended. The entire house was laden with butterflies. Polaroid pictures were taken of everyone who attended. And to top it all off, my thyroid won a Lifetime Achievement Award from the president of the American Thyroid Association. Her heart just filled with joy, receiving such lovely recognition. 2 days later, I headed into surgery. I was so tenderly aware of the transformative power of acknowledgement and curiosity about how unwanted experiences may be right, even when they seem so wrong at first glance. My appreciation of my thyroid and acknowledgement of all she'd done for me for the last 49 years changed my thyroid cancer experience. It made it possible for me not to make her cancer wrong, which I honestly hadn't known was possible. My acknowledgement of some unbelievably uncomfortable feelings that showed up through this and my curiosity about how these feelings might be right instead of wrong led to an expansion I couldn't have imagined. Yes, on the cusp of my sweet thyroid's departure, I thanked my cancer for these beautiful gifts I received. After surgery, it was a different story. Transitioning to life without my physical thyroid was more challenging than I expected. It felt like I had a postpartum brain. My memory was gone, accompanied by a fog that resulted in numerous repetitive conversations with others because I had no idea I'd already talked with them about it. It was a real trip for me, and perhaps for those who embraced those repeat conversations too. Depression was also a big part of the picture. Oh, depression. When the body doesn't have enough thyroid hormone, depression is a typical result, and depression descended upon me during this time. I fought it like a champ. I made my depression so wrong. I felt embarrassed that I was depressed. I didn't want to be depressed. I felt so much better with cancer than I did without it. And then I discovered another story. I believed I was worth less in my depressed state than in my high vibe form. Depression is an experience with which I am familiar. It had been a good 10 years since I'd last swum in those waters in any significant way, but those waters I knew. But this time, I'd shifted my lens from wrongness to curiosity. It was interesting to experience it again with a different lens. I understood the power of my focus in an updated way. I understood the power of the stories I tell myself, too. During those months of depression, I witnessed my mind spinning tales. Those convincing tales were so familiar because many of them showed up every time I experienced depression. I didn't feel understood. I felt forgotten. I didn't feel loved. Those same thoughts showed up this time too, yet I could sometimes recognize that they were stories, which automatically invited some ease into those months of depression through which I waded. Interestingly, in the last week or two before surgery, I'd begun to notice that the swallowing difficulties I'd experienced for 8 or more months were still present, but diminished. After surgery, I was stunned to learn that the mass the surgeon found was 3 times smaller than at the time of my diagnosis. While numerous factors pointed to a more aggressive type of thyroid cancer, the pathology report showed the most unaggressive type possible. I can't begin to explain all of this, but this experience changed something for me. It made me understand more deeply just how powerful it is when we come home to our bodies and emotions in the present moment. I discovered that even the things that appear the most wrong in our lives can ultimately hold unexpected gifts for us. Here's what I've learned. It's human to want to deem our unwanted experiences and emotions definitively wrong. Yet this often has the unexpected result of cutting us off from other possibilities, awarenesses, or understandings. But sometimes we still need to make things wrong for a while, which is exactly what I did on and off through my cancer journey, and still do sometimes now. Each time I shifted from a lens of wrongness, when I could only see how wrong the given situation was, and invited in a lens of curiosity, something changed for me. This enabled me to experience cancer without demonizing it. I didn't intend to do that, but that's what happened. When I didn't demonize my cancer, this created room for me to understand my cancer cells in a new way, as confused cells. My sweet cancerous thyroid taught me how possible it is to have a different experience with just about anything in our lives when we shift the lens we use to one that invites curiosity instead of automatic wrongness.
Thank you so much, Emily. That reading was so candid and evocative. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thanks.
Mhm. Our final reader for today is Janet Zinn. Janet is a successful psychotherapist in private practice in New York City. Janet was a mental health first responder post 9/11 and more recently in the global COVID-19 pandemic. He is an expert in trauma and loss and has worked as a consultant for Fortune 100 companies and has spoken locally and internationally on getting through traumatic events. Janet incorporates mindfulness, creativity, humor, and enduring compassion in her work. She maintains a weekly blog in getting through difficult times and related topics. Amidst a tumult of fear and uncertainty, the book In the Time of Coronavirus emerges as a guiding beacon. Janet, a seasoned psychotherapist, takes you on a profound journey through the pandemic, weaving personal reflections with actionable self-care strategies. And now we'll hear from Janet.
Thank you. First, thank you so much for showing up and giving part of your weekend to this. So thank you. I so appreciate it. When I was thinking about what part of the book to read, I kept looking at different sections, and then I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go to exactly 4 years ago. And this is the week 4 years ago. It was week 10, A Walk in the Woods. This weekend, I went on a hike in the North Woods of Central Park. It was warm, and yet it was empty in the North Woods, unlike more popular areas. I was able to move freely up and down hills, trekking on dirt paths. It was heaven. This is the park I've loved all these years, a necessary sanctuary in the middle of Manhattan. I've missed being able to move freely since we became aware of coronavirus cases in the city. As much as I love walking, traditionally finding an imperative for my well-being, moving on foot with a sense of danger lowers the level of pleasure I derive. So spending the afternoon rambling past birds and dense greenery was a gift that restored my spirit. I have spent the last 2.5 months, like so many, navigating an emotional minefield. Angry outbursts shocked me as I thought I was fine until I lashed out. Mostly, I felt overwhelmed. To quell those feelings, I've been fortunate enough to work with courageous individuals who inspire me. I also meditate, talk through my issues, and find humor where I can. And I practice self-compassion again and again and again, because I am behaving in ways that lend themselves to double down on patience and kind-heartedness. I am eating delicious foods, often with abandon. Sometimes I'm simply eating to medicate. I have a cocktail in the evenings, enjoying the fuzzy feeling it produces. Before COVID-19, cocktails were for parties and gatherings with friends. I am judgmental of myself. Our apartment tends to be chaotic, yet I don't have the energy nor the inclination to clean it every day. I'm critical of Larry, my husband, and Alex, my son, even though they've been helpful in so many ways. I don't compliment them or thank them enough, but apparently I can't point out perceived deficits enough either. These are not qualities I'm happy to share, yet admitting my flaws can help to lessen their potency. It makes room for kindness and patience with myself, as well as with my family. I'm finding that ongoing compassion is essential to muddling through the pandemic. That's why the North Woods was so soothing. I was alone in a rare patch of New York City nature, joyful and rejuvenated. The experience, along with a bike ride and a walk during the weekend, gave me the impetus to be kinder to myself and to my family. On my bike ride, I passed the North Woods while a light wind gently glided past my masked face. I watched dog owners in fields keeping their social distance as their pets frolicked in the grass. These rare but essential experiences bring me back to a peaceful place of gratitude. When I get home, I am more accepting. I can laugh with Larry and Alex with ease. They are good company when I'm centered, though being centered has been challenging these days. Nonetheless, I will take the gifts where I can. I am thankful that the city has kept the parks open. And on those days I can't stay in the parks when they're too crowded, I will always admire a tree or the flowers. And in the hours that I can roam freely in the park, even if I have to walk a couple of miles to reach a quiet corner, I will continue to take it in. Food for my soul. The self-care tips that I have with this are stop and smell the roses. Sometimes we pass beautiful nature too quickly, especially in the city. When nature is spotty, stopping to admire the colors and when applicable, the scent, we get a sliver of joy. Ask for help. We don't have to do this alone. Reaching out to friends or those you trust can be just the support you need. Sing aloud in the shower, in the bedroom, or wherever. Singing alters our energy. Compassion, compassion, compassion. We need it for ourselves and for others, and others need it too. When we are being hard on ourselves, pull out the compassion card and see if it can soothe. And find nature if you're able. If you're quarantined, do you have plants or a window that looks out on a tree? If you are social distancing, are you able to walk on the grass, walk on the beach, or go into the woods? If so, enjoy. And then I'm going to just continue with the week that's coming up. So week 11, ambivalence of mind. We keep hearing how mindfulness is the way to go. It brings us back to the now. But I'm not loving the now so much. This is my struggle to use mindfulness techniques with my tendency to deny what I don't like. I've started this blog post twice this weekend already. I was feeling grateful that Larry learned how to shuck oysters and we could enjoy them now at home. I was grateful that I have a comfortable bed for a much needed yet rare nap in the afternoon. I was grateful for all the workers who make life bearable during the coronavirus. It felt so good to then be open to the writing process. After one paragraph, I stopped. There were work issues, home chores, and unanswered texts and calls to make. I got busy. The business kept me from enjoying the busyness kept me from enjoying my bounty. It took me far away from blissful gratitude. The weekend continued, and I continued to do my meditations, mindful-ish walks, stretching, taking photographs, or making tentative plans with Alex and Larry. I found comfort in each at the time. But then my mind would whirl with have-tos and shouldn'ts. My brain was spinning with all the things I wanted to change as soon as I could get to them. The apartment, though small, harkens with projects to be done. The bathroom ceiling is caving in from a leak that's been fixed numerous times over the years. We don't want someone arbitrary coming into our space, but we don't want the ceiling to fall in on us either. Lucy, a joy, needs daily walks. Once out, it's a pleasure to go at her sniffy pace, but I get annoyed that I have to take her out in the middle of some project or other. Fixating on these and other moments seems like the opposite of mindfulness. Sheryl Crow sings, "It's not having what you want, it's wanting what you've got." Great sentiment, but really? Yes, I have enjoyed having less to do so I can recover from the stresses of living and working in the pandemic. Yes, it's nice to appreciate some quality time with Larry and Alex. However, the reality is that we usually are in our own corners in the apartment during our waking hours. Most of the time, however, it's not enjoying this moment. Most of the time, I'm not thrilled with my impatience, ire, sadness, or existential loneliness. Most of the time, it's not quality time. It's enduring the phase and getting through it. Nonetheless, I will continue to practice mindfulness. I will practice eating slower and enjoying the experience. I practice that I often forget to employ. I will continue to meditate, often enjoying the idea of it, if not the actual practice of meditation. I will work on walking mindfully, even if that means I experience righteous indignation at those who fail to wear a mask or move away to a safe place. I have imagined that mindfulness was a way to a more joyful life, a promise to erase fear, grief, loss, anger, and other uncomfortable feelings. But during the time of coronavirus, I see that it is simply a time to be. I actually feel uncomfortable feelings more, not less. And if I'm telling the truth, I'm not completely grateful for all these difficult emotions. But here I am, my ambivalent self, like the rest of us, sheltering in place at this time in history. The self-care tips. Draw or paint. If you enjoy it, great. If not, see if you can remember being a child and draw or paint with abandon, relishing the process rather than the result. Try a new food or spice. Just taking in a new experience with your sense of taste can open other areas of your mind. Clean out one drawer, shelf, or corner of your home. You might not be able to do the big projects, but tackling something small can give us a sense of accomplishment. Light a candle, if it's safe. A flame can be a symbol of transmutation. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. And thank you for, closing with those tools and resources for readers to use as well. Yeah, that's great. So at this time, we have about 10-15 minutes for our audience Q&A. If anyone in the audience has a question for one or more of our authors, please go ahead and type it in the chat and I'll make sure it gets asked. Authors, if you have questions as well, you're welcome to put those in the chat too. But I do have a question to start us off. This is a question for all three authors. Your books have emerged out of your practices and life experiences. When did you know it was time to compile your work in a book for the public's consumption? And maybe we could start in reading order. So Paul, if you want to start us off with this one.
When did I figure out it was ready for public consumption? Is that what you said?
Yes.
I don't know if I've actually figured that out. Um, I mean, one of the things that really had my interest, someone asked me the other day, when did you decide to write a book about family? I said, I really didn't. I was much more interested in the nature of boundaries and how they control the flow of affection, love, decision making, problem solving. And that led me to teach more in that area. And it was like, okay, I think the teaching has come a long way. It's time to wrap it up in a book. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. When it kind of culminates in that way. Yeah, totally. Emily, how about you? When did you know it was time to put your work together into this one collected work? Oh, Emily, I think you're muted again.
I'll get it one day. I had wanted to write books for 20 some odd years, and then it just was never clear what the topics. I had all different ones that I played with. And then honestly, my experience with thyroid cancer was extremely powerful in ways that I had not anticipated. And I started in that process, I started writing and just sharing on social media what my experience was. And I was just sharing my experience, but people were relating it to their own lives beyond cancer. And it something about that was really, it pulled me in, and I started writing more and more. And then I started a blog, and people were resonating with that. And it just started to get more clear to me through that process about the lens of wrongness, and that we will always have that, but that there are ways to also offset it. And I don't know, it got born. It got born in that process, and then it just unfolded. Sometimes it did not unfold, and that was painful when there was writer's block, but overall it unfolded into the book that it is now. So
Yeah, so very organic, it sounds like, which I
for
feel like
sure.
we can feel that in the voice as well. So that totally
Cool.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Janet, how about you? When did you know it was time, upon these reflections on the coronavirus, when did you know it was time to put that into a book for others to read?
Let's see. Well, there were some really kind people that were reading the blog while the coronavirus was happening and then afterwards. And a couple of people suggested I create a book of it. And I just thought, this is a blog, I'll write a different book. And so I started writing that other book, and I would just hit like just these dead ends again and again and again. It just wasn't happening. And but I just was, going to be stubborn and keep going. And so but very frustrated. And then finally I just was like, this isn't happening. I have these blog posts. I'll just see, because I do think that like being able to share about our imperfections and kind of the messiness of things, and I don't have to get to a certain place that I then can write a book in which I can speak eloquently about it. Like, this is just going to be a mess. And so I can share that, because we're all live that way, or many of us live that way. And so, I was fortunate enough to find atmosphere, and then we worked together to get the book done.
Yeah, and I think we were even more fortunate to be able to work with you. So that's just wonderful. We have another question that is for all three authors from Kelly. For all of you, what did you discover about your topic in the process of writing your book that you didn't realize or maybe hadn't considered when you first began? Maybe Emily, do you want to start us off with this one?
Sure. Honestly, I think the thing that I discovered or that it reminded me the most was that I was not writing a book teaching everyone how to get rid of their lens of wrongness, because it's not going to work if we try, because it's part of being human. And so it really, somehow in the process of writing, I kept coming back to that because I bump into my own lens of wrongness all the time, and then realize it sometimes soon, sometimes a little later, and that's more painful then, and make a shift more into curiosity. And so that's really what ended up informing my book so much, is that it's okay, we're all going to have it, and there are things that we can do to make it more of a dance so that our experience starts to feel different. But I think that is what I would say, is that it just like really fine-tuned for me that it isn't about trying to eradicate it from our lives. It's about finding a way to dance with it.
Yeah, I love that. Dancing with it. That's a great way to put that sentiment. I might take that. Um, going to Janet, how about you? What did you discover or realize in the process of writing your book?
So many things, but I suppose the thing that I'll share is how important it is that we go through difficult phases in our life or just situations, and that it's so helpful to remember that we've gotten through difficult things before, and then what are the things that helped us to get through those, so that we can bring them into the present, so that we can just move through that. And also that there's a power in being proud of ourselves rather than, always living in the shame, that we can be proud of some of the accomplishments that we've had, both small, whether it's getting one task done, or whether it's just getting through a day, and how important that is.
Yeah, definitely. I think we kind of take for granted those smaller things, but especially, in a time like the pandemic, those were huge. Those were wins that we had to take. So, going to Paul, what did you discover about your topic through writing the book that you maybe didn't know while or before you wrote it?
I think I discovered more about me and writing. And the discovery was how much my writing is an inquiry. I mean, occasionally a friend or a colleague will mention that someone might read it, and I'm like a little confused. Oh, someone might read it? I mean, I am really immersed in the inquiry, and I'm delighted to put my belief system together in this fashion.
Yeah, I mean, that writing first approach before you're thinking about other people reading it, I think can really make a huge difference. So, yeah, happy to hear about that. This is another question for all three of you from Abiha. What prompted each of you to process these feelings with the outlook that you used? Janet, do you want to start us off with your answer to this question relative to your book?
Sure. When being positive doesn't work for everything, it doesn't mean that it's not wonderful in many situations, but not denying the really hard experiences and the hard feelings, and also being able to open it up rather than like just put a lid on it, makes a huge difference, and certainly informed how I could share this.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure that was kind of a challenge sometimes, and that we can all really relate to. But going to Paul, what prompted you to process what you had learned through all these therapy sessions and what you were kind of putting together?
I think one of the things I'm incredibly grateful for is how much I have learned as a psychotherapist from the people I sit with. Um, I oftentimes feel a little like I'm doing something wrong, like I'm supposed to be some source of enlightenment for the folks in my office, and there's so much I take away that I assumed about humanity that was somewhat erroneous and short-sighted. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I can kind of grasp that idea as well. It comes up, but this is another question that we have. This is for Emily from Jenny. Do you have thoughts on a second book, or do you feel you covered it all pretty well in this one?
I mean, I think life never stops, giving us more stuff and unfolding more stuff in our lives. So I don't think I have covered everything in this book for sure. I'm positive that I will discover more stuff to write about. Am I going to start writing that next book tomorrow? No. This publishing process is a big deal, and it hasn't even come out yet. It's coming out in the next few weeks. So I'm going to pace myself, but I do plan to write more books, and I am confident that I'll keep discovering more things that I'm excited to share as I experience them myself and as I notice that they make a difference in my patients' lives. And so, yes, more books are coming, but not tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that's a great diplomatic answer to that. And thank you so much. And thank you all to all three authors. With that, I just want to say it was just wonderful to hear all three of you read your books and bring these words to life in the voices of their creators. So to Paul, Emily, and Janet, just thank you again for being generous with your time and your thoughts today. And to the audience, thank you for being here with us. The response in the chat today has been really wonderful to see and just so supportive. So I want to thank the audience as well for being here with us. Don't forget, of course, that you can order Family, What If You're Right, and In the Time of Coronavirus from the links that I'm putting in the chat. One more time there. Please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com, where you can browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, or submit a book manuscript of your own. You can submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and just let us know that you attended today's event. But other than that, we'll look forward to hearing from you. And in the meantime, have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you all for coming. So great to have you here.
So appreciative. Thank you.